Incoming transmission from an unknown source. It seems to be urgent. Patching them through. They're calling themselves the HoloNet Marauders.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the HoloNet Marauders podcast. I'm AJ, and I'm joined here by my bomb bad Jedi pals, Jamie and Matt. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Good as always.
Doing pretty good. I think we're doing great actually because Mandalorian has ended, which was a fun season.
It was.
We thought we had a lull of Star Wars stuff, but we've had a lot of great books come out, which we're going to get into today. That's kind of the topic for our episode, and we've had Jedi Survivor come out, which is unbelievable. We're having so much fun with that
for a while.
And we saw Return of the Jedi yesterday for the 40th anniversary, the three of us. So that was
in
really
theaters.
fun.
Oh, that was
May
awesome.
4th is coming up. So there's a lot going on. But our guest today, you may know her from This Week in Star Wars. You may know her from the Star Wars Celebration live stage. Or you may just know her as a Star Wars author, Kristin Baver. How are you doing?
Hello, very well. How are you?
We're doing
fantastic,
pretty swell.
We're doing pretty good.
Thank
All
you so
those
much for joining us.
Oh, goodness. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so excited that you guys just got to see Return of the Jedi in theaters again.
Yeah, that was crazy because the three of us, like, I don't know, we've never seen the OT on the big screen.
That's a first for us. That was a first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
The three of us are prequel kiddo age, so Return of the Jedi never was in theaters for us, but that was just like really cool to see. I feel like when we were watching it, there were so many things we had never seen before, even though it's a movie we've seen like a million times.
Oh yeah.
Yes. That happened for me when I went to see Empire Strikes Back with a live symphony. Like they do a live
Yeah.
with it, and because it was a live music show, they also had subtitles on. And as I was watching Empire Strikes Back, I was watching, and they're in the hut with Yoda, and he says like root leaf stew I make, and I was like, I've never heard this line before. How have I ever known that is where this comes from? Because I know about root leaf stew, but I didn't know it was like in the movie somehow. I guess I thought that was something Jason Fry made up at some point and put in like a locations book, and I accepted it. But no, it's in the movie, and so I love that when you see these films on the big screen or just like in a different scenario, that you always notice something new. I always notice something new in the background of A New Hope too. Like if I get to see that in a movie theater, there's always something I've never looked at before in the cantina scene or in the droid lineup that all of a sudden I'm like, how have I never noticed this? I've watched this movie so many times.
and that's it. Like
Jabba's palace was an absolute gold mine.
we're having a field day.
Oh my god, there was one Gamorrean when R2 and 3PO and R2 has the message from Luke, and Luke's like, oh, I gift you these droids, and 3PO's like, you're playing the wrong message. There's like a Gamorrean in the background, he's laughing his ass off. It's amazing. And it's like those little touches that the extras do.
So good.
It's so funny. Like I just love that. And I never noticed him before. Chuckles the Gamorrean is what I call him now.
Chuckles.
Here's Jose Older with his cannon mallet right now. We need
There
it.
we go.
Cannon.
Oh my gosh.
That's so good. Before we started off the air, Jamie mentioned that there's a Disneyland story.
Yeah, there's a Disneyland story. It's brief, a Disneyland story. And Kristin, I'm not sure if you possibly recall this, but Star Wars Celebration 2022, walking out of Star Wars night outside of Disneyland, you ran into us actually.
Wait, did you give me the Bendu patch?
No, but I gave a postcard. I was wearing a jacket that looked like Tech's armor. And I heard someone behind me that was just like, that's Tech's jacket or that's Tech's armor. That's really cool.
You had the Lula.
And, yeah, I had the Lula that.
The keychain.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh gosh, who was with us? Phil Sosak was with us as well, I believe.
Yes.
I think.
It was with me.
It wasn't
not with.
He wasn't with us. He was with you.
The entire situation. Regardless, we ran into you outside of Disneyland after Star Wars night. And I remember it vividly, but it was a long day. So
we had our big flag with our logo on it. Yeah, that was a fun time.
Yes. Oh, we were waiting to cross the street
on the sidewalk.
Literally on the sidewalk.
Okay, no, I remember. So that night I had like two moments like that. That moment and there was another moment where I was walking near Galaxy's Edge and somebody stopped me and gave me this really cool Bendu patch. And I cannot remember her name right now to save my life. But it was funny because I went to Star Wars night with Phil Shostak and our good friend Lucas Seastrom, who's also a Lucasfilmer and a wonderful writer and historian. And we went and we like circled Galaxy's Edge, and then we were like, we should go ride Splash Mountain right now. There's no line. And then we went over there and did that. So that was why we didn't run into as many people, because we were off riding Splash Mountain for probably the last time. And the Indy ride, because that's always a favorite.
Oh, we love the Indy
Yeah,
ride.
no, but nice to see you all again.
Yeah. But yeah, that was, I don't know. To go off Celebration, like, I love the vibe of Celebration. We didn't get to go to London this year, but it's so fun to get people give out stuff like the patch you got there and stuff like that. Like, I love that so much.
The swag that everyone makes, like there's the cool stuff that is the official stuff, in the store, or we always have some giveaways at the live stage. Like we had a really great sticker this year that was Akbar, and it was it's a trap of some sort. I think it's a trap, but it was like on a Mind the Gap symbol.
Yeah, I saw a picture of that.
Oh, that's really good.
Yes, and like there's t-shirts, and there's always cool stuff that's like the official capacity giveaway stuff, or things you can purchase. And then there's like the amazing swag that everybody who comes to the convention brings. And I always think those things are my favorite because they're so creative, and they don't worry about is this the official logo for this? Is this what the model of this creature looks like? It's pure fun and joy, and such a nice expression of how much everybody loves Star Wars. And so I love when I get the chance to actually trade some swag. Although last time, I think in Anaheim, actually, maybe I gave you these patches if I had them on me still. I had some like vintage Star Wars fan club patches that I had just like found a big box of, and I was like, well, when people give me swag, I will have something to give them at least, because I didn't say anything, but I was like, this is cool, I hope this is cool, and people were really happy about it. So it was nice to be able to feel like when somebody's so generous and wants to give you something like that, it's like I always want to have something to give in return, because otherwise it feels like odd, like, oh, thank you for the gift. But and I mean
it's fun to trade.
It's freely given. It's not intended for somebody to always have like a transactional trade-off, but it's nice when you can. Seeing the designs and like those patches that people trade, and then they like form a Voltron patch.
It's like, oh, collect like all like 5 or 6 of them. I have like a few just like random like ones that like I'm never gonna complete the set because I never found everybody. But yeah, our first celebration, we ended up doing. I learned about the swag trading like right before we went, and this was for like Chicago, and so I like panicked and I bought 50 postcards in the lobby of my office building in Boston that literally just said "Greetings from Boston."
That worked.
And it worked. And I just like signed like that back. I was like, oh, I signed it. At the time, it was just AJB. HoloNet Marauders didn't exist yet. So I was like, oh, from Jen the Jedi and Boston Kylo. And I was like, this is my swag. And so for Anaheim, I commissioned a friend to draw our logo, who drew our logo also. She like made our like droid like on vacation because she's in Anaheim. And I was really looking forward to making a London one as well, but it didn't happen. So next time.
Awesome. I hope you guys get to go to Japan. I hope I get to go to Japan. I hope we're all there together, because I'm really excited about just getting to experience Celebration in a different location is always really cool, because it's accessible then to so many more people that maybe didn't get to go to the last one, or if you skip the last one, now hopefully you're able to come to the next one. But I just also love Celebration. My first celebration was actually Orlando in 2017, and I was not working at StarWars.com full-time yet, but I was a freelancer. So I was there working, but really just kind of like meeting the whole team for the first time and seeing Celebration from that perspective for the first time was really fascinating. And I just remember like falling so much more deeply in love with Star Wars at Celebration, which is funny to say because it's like I loved it already, but sometimes I grew up in Pennsylvania in like a pretty small area, And I had a couple friends who liked Star Wars too, but it can feel a little bit like when you're not surrounded by other Star Wars fans, it can feel a little bit like, oh, this is just something that I like, but maybe not everyone likes it. That's okay. And you have kind of your little group of people who love it, as much as you do, who you can talk about things and get excited for things. And hopefully I have friends who in Pennsylvania who are reading the same books that I am, so that we can talk about it. And, then to go into Celebration and see just how massive the love for it is and how many people love it, is really just kind of staggering that first time, especially if you're coming from a place where you feel like people love it because Star Wars has never gone away. But if you don't have that one-to-one interaction, talking to other people who love it, and that just feeling of we're all part of the same community, there's just nothing like it.
Yeah. It's definitely, you walk into Celebration and you just look around and you go, these are my people.
This is home.
And you just boom, and just settle right in for 3 or 4 days. You're just
Well, and before my first Celebration, I remember so that was 2017. So for the last 2 years, Star Wars had been spooling up again with Force Awakens. And so you were starting to see more people come out as Star Wars fans, and either they would be talking about the new movie or they'd be wearing a t-shirt. And so I would just start in the grocery store talking to people randomly if they had a Star Wars shirt, because I was like, friend, we like something the same. Let's discuss. But then you get into Celebration and you're like, oh, I can't possibly talk to everyone here.
Right.
I can't.
I tried one day at the last Celebration, and I had to go back to the hotel room because I was
you get pretty burnt out pretty quickly.
Exhausted.
the legendary Friday.
So to go off Celebration while we're on the topic, I had a question for you about what is it like being at the heart of the Star Wars galaxy on the Star Wars live stage? I know you did a lot of those. We watched you on the live stream from here, interviewing a bunch of different people that whole weekend. But what is that like, interviewing legendary guests on that stage?
Yeah, I had to start keeping a list on day 2 because there were so many of them that I was starting to forget as I was trying to kind of retell to my friends, oh my God, this day's been amazing. I got to talk to this person, this person, this person. And then I was like, oh no, I forgot someone really essential. And so I was just I was keeping a list on my phone and just taking the note cards that we had up on stage, back in a little pile. So, because when you're in kind of the heat of that much excitement and just the craziness of a live production, you don't really get to sit back and reflect on it until the end of the day. There's not a lot of time even in between to really sit back and you feel the moment. So kind of every day you're sitting back and reflecting on it. At least I was, and thinking I can't believe that happened. And everyone saw it and it was recorded and I can go back and look at it. It's not just a story that I have to tell and be no, for real, I met this person. It's no, we had a whole conversation and everybody saw. But it's so bizarre and surreal, I think, to be at the heart of it, to answer your question. I had not done the live stage fully in Anaheim because I was working on a lot of editorial. And so just to try to be in panels, but also on the live stage, I need to clone myself. So, in Anaheim, I did some things with the live program, and I went out and did a couple of packages. But I was doing a lot of, running around the convention center, covering panels at the time. So I wasn't able to participate as fully. So this was the first year for me that I was able to just be there constantly for the 4 days, and do those interviews on the stage. And there's just, for me, one of the greatest joys of my job is getting to talk to the amazingly talented creators who are making the new Star Wars, and getting to ask them questions just about their process and their favorite thing. And one thing I love to talk to people about when they first come into Star Wars is find out how they got introduced to Star Wars in the first place. Now they're working on it, but what was their entry point as a fan, or who showed it to them as a child, or maybe they missed the boat on it entirely until adulthood, and that's okay too. I love hearing those stories and just talking to people about being a part of it, because I think everybody, now that Lucasfilm has been around for over 50 years, almost everybody who walks in was a fan first, and now they get to play in that sandbox. And so it's just a really just lovely feeling to get to sit in that moment with those creators and talk to them about that. But also especially like with the live stage, because we have the benefit and the joy of getting to do those types of interviews, throughout the year for various reasons. As Mandalorian's coming out, we get to sit down and talk to Pedro and John and Dave and Rick and Katie. And then, when you have the live stage situation, it's totally different, I think, because even though a lot of those folks are, actors or directors or producers, they've been in front of huge crowds. It's a little overwhelming, I think, for some of them to come out on the live stage and just be completely enveloped 360. Like there's that catwalk, and then there's the area around the forge where we were sitting, and it was just people as far as the eye could see out, like fanning out from that.
Yeah.
And I think it was Tony Gilroy who actually said, that it was kind of overwhelming because as a writer, showrunner, behind the scenes person, you don't normally see that element of, just the crush of people who are so excited about the thing that you made, and just that pure joy energy kind of rippling off of them. So that was really just wonderful. But yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question or if I'm just going on and on and gushing.
It's good to hear the emotions of it is what I wanted to hear. And I mean, you nailed it.
You're giving us emotions, that's for sure.
And
okay,
it's
all right.
It's just something I had to ask because, we were watching that all weekend, and you could see the crowd. And we've been in it, at Anaheim and Chicago when we've gone. Like, we've been in that crowd, and seeing Hayden Christensen and Ewan McGregor come out in Anaheim, like, we got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's like being at a rock concert or something. Like, it's so cool.
Yeah, when Ewan came out this time to thank everybody,
That's great.
I didn't have to be up there, so I took that moment to like sneak out the side door and just stand at like the edge of the crowd to kind of experience it from that side, from that point of view, for a moment. And yeah, it's really amazing to see what happens, I guess, at Celebration that's totally unscripted and, unexpected. And I think the live stage is also really amazing for that because, you have the panels and you get the schedule, and sometimes you get kind of a rough rundown of who might be on the panels, or you can guess based on, if the description says, hey, we're going to talk about the Mandalorian, you can bet that John and Dave will be there,
Yeah.
But with the live stage, it's like every single time one of me or Christina or Anthony Carboni would pop out on stage, it would be like, you've no idea who we're about to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just love the surprise element of it too.
Yeah, exactly.
It always baffles me just like how well you guys. This is a little compliment for you guys, but it always baffles me how well like the live stage like is always ran. No, I'm serious though, because like live productions are always a nightmare regardless. Like AJ, Matt, and I like all like know that personally, but like seeing the live stage like do this like so well, and like it is a very long stream as well. And the fact that like it's sometimes a surprise for you guys as well, I'm just like, oh, like, oh my god, it's incredible to see that as like a viewer, and it's always like really cool to just like see you guys absolutely crushing it every time too.
Thank you. Yeah, well, and I have to say, so much of that is the people working tirelessly behind the scenes for the months beforehand to put it together. The Belgian prop crew and the fans in Germany who make the amazing stage. Just from that element alone, it really just like it sets the tone for everything that's going to happen, on that stage. Versus if it was just a couple of chairs and a black curtain, like it really just it makes it feel so immersive and so unique. And all that starts, months beforehand, but also the people who are working just tirelessly behind.
Oh, yeah.
5 days. 5+ days, I would say, with like rehearsals and setups, but, just getting us through to those closing ceremonies. It's really something amazing to see, just all the hard work and love and passion that goes into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that when you talk to these people, you like to hear how they got into Star Wars. Because that's always a question. That's our go-to question too, right?
That's our question.
For you, how did you get into Star Wars, and how did you get to the point where you are now, working for Lucasfilm, doing a bunch of different stuff?
Yeah, sometimes I look back and I honestly think I don't know. I don't know how I lucked out quite that much with timing and being in this position. But I will say a big part of it was, perseverance, and, it's a very circuitous route I think I took to get to my current role and the work I get to do now. But 5 years before I started, I didn't even know this job existed or that it was a possibility. But to back up all the way to the beginning of my Star Wars fan origin story, I think it's a very similar tale to a lot of folks, but I remember distinctly, I think I discovered them on the Sci-Fi Channel back in the day when they were showing those, and it was pre-release of the special editions, but like right on the cusp of it. So I think, now in hindsight, I understand how these things work, and that they were probably spooling up and getting people excited and showing, the original 3, in syndication. And also, after I watched them on the Sci-Fi Channel, our parents bought us the 3 VHS set that would almost immediately go out of date as the special editions came out and were updated. But we had it long enough that we watched that Return of the Jedi tape so many times that we broke it. And then we had to go to the mall and go to a movie store and try and find that, because we were very particular, that specific version, and it was the kind that has like the half faces on all of the box art. So it was like the half face Yoda, and I was like, we need to find this version of Return of the Jedi before it's no longer available. And we were able to find a replacement, thank goodness. But my sister still has those tapes. She will not give them to me. And I think it's hilarious because I'm like, but I work there. And she's like,
right?
No, we still watch them sometimes. So I was like, okay, all right. But yeah, so it was like what was really interesting to me, I think, being a kid discovering it that way, was that when I first discovered it, watching it, it felt very much like I had just discovered something, even though the movies had been out, point of order, for like 20 years at that point. But I didn't know, because, you're a kid and it's new to you. So you think it must be brand new to the whole world. And I remember trying to tell my parents about it, and they were like, yeah, we know. Like, we've seen this. And I was like, but this is really good. And they were like, we thought you would probably get into this at some point. And I got 2 of the action figures around the same time for Christmas. And I can't remember now, my parents might remember, but I can't remember if I saw the movies first or if they got me the action figures first. But I think I probably had like started to watch the films and get excited about them. But I got Chewbacca and R2-D2 from the Power of the Force collection.
Oh yeah. Nice.
And those figures, like, not only did that, I think, really ignite something in my love of Star Wars, because I remember I had them by the time the special editions came out, and then I wanted to like take them with me to the theater. But my mom was like, no, you're going to lose them. Don't do that. So I didn't get to take them with me, but it started this whole like collector mentality for me. As a kid, I had never been a big collector of other, fandoms or items. I had like a smattering of a lot of different toys, but with this one in particular, because you have such a connection to those different characters and their stories, and you want to have that, version of it that you can hold in your hand and display on your shelf or put on your desk or, play with. And so it really ignited and touched off this whole spark of, I remember us going to all these different toy stores and trying to find the C-3PO in that line and failing miserably for months, and like asking people who worked at the store, when do you get your shipments? Can we come in on a Tuesday? If you get one, like, how early do you open? When can we get this? How can we find this toy? And, just like the thrill of the hunt in that was so much fun. And it was something that, my family, did together on the weekends. And, now sometimes when I'm buying the Black Series and I think this is a very expensive habit that started very early on, and then I think like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have bought all of these Star Wars figures over the years, but no, I'm really glad I have them. And I keep buying them. Yeah. Sculpts keep getting better, no shade to the Power of the Force line, because I love it. I still have all of mine, but technology has improved. They now scan, everybody and the pieces, and can do the 3D modeling by computer. And also just in the last few years when they started doing that photo real.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh,
I was just like, game changer now. I was like, I need to buy everything.
And for reference, here's a Power of the Force figure, one of my favorites. Buff Vader.
Buff Vader.
Buff Vader. I love
They
him.
just take the head off of He-Man and put Vader on it and
Yeah.
call it a day.
I think the cape kind of comes off on that one.
Oh yeah, the cape is hard plastic,
The
and you
cape's
just
hard
kind of
plastic, but it comes off, and then
yank it
I was
off.
like, when do you need this? When is Vader ever just walking around like that? I don't
Look
know.
at this. Look at he looks naked now.
He does, right? You're
Oh,
like,
that
it's
looks
wrong.
odd.
And I'm sure they did it for manufacturing reasons at the time, or for playability, because I do remember he couldn't sit in vehicles unless you took that cape off.
That is
Because
true.
There it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, this thing is like hard, like
it is.
hard plastic.
I
So
have one.
Yeah, I miss the thrill of the hunt. I know everything's
too.
mostly
Yes.
getting in a queue online and trying to buy something, panicking.
All the new
but-
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pre-pandemic, we mentioned him earlier, but my friend Phil Shostak, who many people who are listening know as well. Pre-pandemic, he and I would occasionally go to our local Target and try and find things in the wild, because he's also
Oh,
a big
yeah.
collector.
hard to
And
get
that
rid
was so much fun. Although I do remember distinctly once we went to Target and he saw the Padme in Black Series first, and there was only one. And so then, and he got to take it home, and I was like,
Oh.
"Oh, this is the problem with going out hunting with another person who wants the same things that you do." Because now, like, is there going to be a fist fight in the Target? No, but it's like, oh no, we have to find some like rule of who gets to have it. It's the person who saw it first. Like, that's fair. That's
Yeah.
fair. And Phil is also the best at recognizing when pre-orders are coming up and either reminding me, or frequently he'll just be like, I pre-ordered you one of these because I know you're going to want it. And I was like, thank you for looking out. So he deserved that Padme first, because he's paid me back in spades now, making sure that I get all those pre-orders that I need online.
Well, that's good. That's good to
That's
hear.
Yeah,
It's
as
just-
a
yeah, go
school
ahead, Matt.
collector of the vintage collection, I miss the hunt even more.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about, if you can't find Black Series in the store, you're up a river
Yeah.
for the
I'm
vintage
looking at all my
collection.
figures around me. I'm like, do I have any?
We
Power of the Force?
in
No.
the past handful of years, like, because like pre-ordering has become so common for like all the new figures, whenever like three of us like hang out, we tend to just like go to like random secondhand stores or thrift stores, or even like old like figure stores. We find like the dustiest, oldest like stores like ever.
They're so funny.
You have like an asthma attack like when you like walk in, even if you don't have asthma. But like we always find something really silly, and it's fantastic because like it's always like the weirdest things too, because like Matt like loves like aliens and like everything in like the background, so like we find like these like wild things. Like
Yes.
that
Like
Yoda
that.
took
That
Matt
Yoda.
like a full like year to like
This took
haggle
me
with
a
the
year
guy.
to buy. They
Like,
were charging $50 for it, and I didn't want to pay $50, so I just waited. And I
I
bartered.
I want it to be known this Yoda looks like crap in person.
Oh, it
like he looks awful.
if you think he looks bad now, look at him. He's my
bad.
son, and I love him.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Yoda that we love.
It's a good one.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
perfect.
I mean,
But yeah, so they're
I'm not going to say one of these looks more screen accurate than the other. I'm not
It would
Hmm.
definitely be this one.
And that, it
Definitely.
would be yours. It would be yours, Matt. Yeah. But
Right.
we can love our sons equally.
Absolutely.
there still is the element of the thrill of the hunt, and like thrifting is like so much fun because of that now.
Well, and actually, just a real quick aside, when I was collecting Power of the Force as a kid, one of my favorite things that I bought wasn't even Power of the Force, but was a vintage Jabba that we found at like a flea market style, like secondhand place. And I remember when I bought it, because I thought, I didn't even know this existed. This is amazing. And, of course, kids for 20 years had been playing with this thing, but it was new to me, and it was,
It's new to
being
the
able
world.
to scour the internet and really, understand everything that was out there and what the value was. So I don't remember how much we paid for it, but then that touched off a secondary hunt because now I had a thing I didn't know existed and I needed a salacious crumb to go with it. And so we were just constantly trying to find little Kowakian monkey lizards, salacious crumb, go with this Jabba the Hutt. But it's still one of my favorite action figures because just the sculpt is beautiful and it has like 3-piece mobility where the tail moves and the whole body kind of rides, and it's a beauty.
We're currently looking for the Phantom Menace Jabba that eats slime.
Oh, the slime comes out of his mouth.
Slime comes out of his mouth.
That's a good one.
We got
every once in a while we have a new holy grail, and then we find our holy grail, and then there's another new one ready to go. So
that's how it goes.
And it's always Phantom Menace merch. It's
for some reason, yeah.
There was a vintage video game convention me and AJ went to like a month ago. We walked in, we cleared them out of Phantom Menace merch, and then we left. And we didn't even realize we did it until we were driving home. I go, do you know what we just did? We just walked in, bought everything Phantom Menace, and just walked out.
Another thing we collect, a good segue here, is Star Wars books.
Yes.
So we're here. The reason we have you here today is to talk about your book, Star Wars 100 Objects, which is amazing. We were lucky enough to get it early, and also show off the other one. It's very heavy. A lot of material in here. Star Wars Timelines, which you also worked on. So
thank you.
These are both like super cool reference books that I was not expecting at all. So, like specifically 100 Objects, like I wasn't expecting a reference book like this because oh my god, there's so much going on, and I love it though.
Small thing aside, I know you don't have anything to do with probably like the size of the book, but I love the size of the book because usually I'm fumbling around with the visual dictionaries and stuff, but like it's very like I can bring this to bed and flip through it in bed much easier or something instead
of having like this big
huge tome in front of me,
like tanning on the roof, but like with a book.
It is like that, yes. Well, it's funny that you mention that because I don't have anything to do with the size. You are correct, but the brilliant people at DK decide what makes the most sense for format and all that. But when I was doing research for it, I had like a number of digital resources that I was reading. And then I also had just a ton of my visual dictionaries that I don't know if you can see, but they're down here, that I still have, the hard copy of. And so just my floor would be lined with them, open to the correct pages. So I could just like move down the line and keep reading about the same item or person or whatever I was researching that day. And it was a little unwieldy. You're right. It was like I have 7 of them open at all times. It was just like covering the floor. Or sometimes I had them like lined up against like the back of my couch, and I would just like flip through and people like, okay, and that's all right, we have that one, okay, we're gonna use this. And they're so big, and they're beautiful, but I was really happy with the way 100 Objects turned out. I also think just big shout out to John Hall, who's the designer on it, who was also a designer on parts of Timelines. Because one designer, just like one author shouldn't write all of Timelines, one designer shouldn't have to do all of Timelines. Like that is a beast of a project. There's a lot.
That's one I can't flip through in bed as easily.
Yes.
That's a huge one.
But we did it on, I think, solely as the designer for 100 Objects. And very early on, I remember him showing me his idea for how to present things, because I think we knew we didn't want to do the visual guide style of just on white, because especially having just one object as the focal point in each spread, it felt like it could be a little bland just visually, because a lot of the items are like gray and brown and like sand colored. There's not a huge amount of color. So I thought it was just a stroke of genius that very early on he was like, I'm going to put all these different pops of color in, and this is the background, and just a really beautiful job of making all of those items that we picked feel really special and unique on those pages.
Yeah. I love how before we even started diving into it, I was just flipping through and it looked like really you're at like a museum archive, and then I'm reading through and the first thing you know is you're like, oh, so I wanted to make this because it seems like it's visiting a museum, and I thought that was the coolest thing up front. So what was that process of deciding, hey, this is a museum tour, and how did that go coming about that decision?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it came from this was one of those rare for me instances where the book idea, came from me and then went through the channels. Usually, in my experience, it's been a case of, we want to do this book and we think you would be the right person to write it. And I'm always like, yes, deal, put me in. But this was a case where I just come off of Skywalker, Family at War, which is also, written in that kind of in-world history voice. And I loved that exploration of trying to figure out, how would somebody describe the Skywalker family and everything they've done, with some authority, but also, as a biographer. And coupled with the fact that I've been to a number of Star Wars exhibits in real life and just know how important it is to be able to be up close and personal with some of those, items and costumes. Like the last one I think I went to was Star Wars Identities. I don't know if you guys had a chance to go to that as it was touring, but it was a really fascinating exhibit that both showcased all of the costumes and some of the props, not all of the costumes, a lot of the costumes, some of the props, and really, told the story of how different characters, their journey and evolution, and the different identities that we see explored throughout Star Wars. And I loved that. I love that exhibit so much. I believe in that exhibit they have one room where you go in and it's just Padme's funeral, and so it's the gown from the funeral scene laid out, with everything, and then it's just like this beautiful room that you just stand in, and it's just so awe-inspiring. So having had that experience, being just a kid who loved museums and an adult who has planned entire vacations around museums. And then also, like, I think the final piece that kind of slotted it all into place for me was through my work, I've had the chance to get to know our physical archives people at Lucasfilm. And every once in a while, they bring out props and we do a segment or an article, and I get to see things, or with permission, every once in a while, I get to put on the gloves and I get to hold the Skywalker lightsaber in my hands. And so having had that like extra additional piece of it, where I'm experiencing it as everyone else who gets to go through the museum is experiencing it. And then I'm experiencing this like weird behind the scenes moment that almost no one gets to do. And I recognize that. And so I thought, like, how can we bring these two things together in a way that, if you can't hold this object in your hands, can we explore a way that, this would be almost like a museum guide to an exhibit that, unfortunately, I would love to go to this museum exhibit, but if you can't go to it, what would the guide look like? And if you were in this museum exhibit, what would the stories be that would be on the plaques next to all of these items, because these are items of note and of value, and they have their own story to tell, but when you glance at them, you may not know that story.
Yeah, I just think it's such a genius idea to have a Star Wars like in-universe museum, as I was saying, like in a book. Like I was reading through it. Did the same as Jamie, where I read through all of it and went through all of it, and then I went back to the beginning, which is a weird way to read it. I was like, oh, she did want it to feel like a museum. And I think this was Jamie's question we had on our list, but like, what's one of your favorite museums you've been to, like real life museum?
In our world, what's one of your
in the real world?
Yeah, it's hard because I feel like in every country I have a favorite, which is weird. Maybe.
I think
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think my favorite in the States is the Air and Space Museum in the Smithsonian.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's one I went to a lot as a kid because we lived like 3 hours away. So we would frequently go on vacation and go down to DC and, go to the museums. But that was the one that, I feel like is so transformative, both because I was a kid who loved sci-fi and, space and all of that, which I think a lot of kids identify with, but also because, well, this is a full circle moment I didn't even intend, but in 1997, they had an exhibit of Star Wars items and I got to go see it twice. And so like just that as an entry point of being a person who loves museums, but now the thing that I also love watching is in the museum. Probably it didn't click for me until right this moment, but that probably was like the first kernel of what would become this idea many years later. Because that experience was really amazing. And I just remember like hovering around Yoda in his, little shielded case, because I couldn't believe that I was like standing in front of Yoda. And you're just like that magic and awe, which never really goes away, because we actually have a Yoda in for a long time. He was in the lobby of Industrial Light and Magic in a case. And I remember my first day on the job, they gave us a tour, and I was like that kid again, just like hovering around the Yoda, being like, "What here?" And then of course in my mind, I'm like, "You're a professional adult who's a job here now. Don't be weird." But that's just in my head.
I can't imagine everybody's able to control themselves in those situations.
It's Yoda. It's Yoda.
Exactly. Oh my God, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, but I just real quickly, just in terms of museums, I think every place I've visited, and I've had the chance, luckily, to do some traveling, pre-pandemic especially, and like there's always a really amazing museum, I think, in every city or country that I visited. Like London, I love going to the Victoria and Albert Museum, and of course the British Museum. You got to go see the Rosetta Stone if you go to London. It's like the must. You got to go see it. It's quite small comparatively to what you might expect. With Paris, you would think it would be the Louvre, but it's not. It's the I'm going to mispronounce it probably, so sorry to anyone who knows French, but it's the Musée d'Orsay, and it's like in an old train station, and they have a ton of Van Goghs, and it's just it's a really fantastic collection. So I love museums, and I love taking that excitement and passion and taking my love of Star Wars and like glomming them together in one idea.
And that's what this is. Yeah,
this is the creation.
So
yeah, go ahead, Jimmy.
I was gonna say to flip that now. So back in Star Wars, excuse me. Back in Star Wars thoughts. If you were to place this collection in some museum in the galaxy, where would you place it? Like what planet or what city would you place it?
Yeah, I would definitely put it on Coruscant.
Yes,
it makes sense.
Yeah, and especially now having seen Andor and Luthen's Gallery, I feel like this belongs even more in Star Wars than I initially had intended when I thought of the idea. But yeah, I would put it in Coruscant, but it wouldn't be a shop where you could buy things. It would actually be like free and open to the public. It would be like the Smithsonian of Star Wars.
That'd be so cool if they had something like that. But yeah.
Yes.
What was
right near the peak that you can touch? Because I feel like that whole area is like a very educational space, maybe.
Oh yeah, the park Umat.
So I would want to put it right there if we're like getting that nitty gritty in terms of like where am I putting this building?
And then they can have the droids come up to you and yell at you. Oh, don't touch.
Yes.
So it's perfect. They already have the droids.
They already have security.
Poor Dr. Pershing. When you were coming up with the book, like what was one item you had on your list that had to be in this? Like what was the number one item that was like, maybe there was a few of them that you were like, oh, these have to be in here?
Yeah, I think the first 5 or 10 were actually really easy to come up with because they felt like if we don't put this in the book, what are we even doing? Like Skywalker saber, number 1. Darth Vader's helmet, but I was very particular with that one where I said like, because we're treating it like these things are real, we also need to have the helmet all melty and crazy from Force Awakens. But which is funny because then I completely ignored the fact that it turns to dust in Rise of Skywalker. But I was like, it's fine. It's okay. Like, we don't have to get that nitty gritty. But in my mind, I do want it to be like bent and twisted and crazy and post Return of the Jedi at least. What else did we have that is absolutely on the list? Some of them, it wasn't an item. It was actually like something from this person. Like I knew I wanted something from Yoda, but I didn't know what I wanted because I also didn't want 100 objects to be 50 lightsabers and 50 other objects.
Yeah.
So, we tried to be really careful with the process of choosing things so that, when you looked at it as a whole, there's a couple lightsabers for sure, but it wasn't, heavily weighted to any one type of object or heavily weighted to any one era or character. Like I think Anakin gets 3 items and he probably has the most of any individual because it's Anakin. Darth Vader, he gets some extras.
Understandable.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But for other characters, it was like, okay, what do we want that's emblematic of this character, but also, something that isn't going to say, this book is 50% lightsabers and other things.
So we have that lightsaber book already. So
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, true. Yeah.
We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. There is a lightsaber book if you want only lightsabers. This one we were very choosy then, like dark sabers in there, Ahsoka's lightsabers. And some of those were items too that I just thought, A, they have a great story, but B, Ahsoka's lightsabers, just the fact that we have a physical prop that I can use in this book is amazing.
Yeah.
You kind of have to put it in at that point.
You do. Yeah. So I think that was one of like the top ones too. And that's probably very early on where I decided I have to be careful about how many lightsabers and helmets I'm putting in here, because it's very easy to fill the whole book with just those, kind of iconic looks.
Yeah.
I think you had a great balance of different things now that you mention
so
it. 'Cause oddly enough, I didn't think of that as I'm going through it. Like, oh, there's a lot of lightsabers, a lot of helmets. Or I didn't coming up with that idea to make this book. That makes sense. That would be like, oh, we don't want these are the great things in Star Wars, but we want other things. Like you have Klieg Lars's chair.
Yes.
I think you have the Neimoidian chair in there too.
Yes.
So there's a good selection of chairs.
So what's
Good
funny
chair.
about that is one
chair.
of the things that I did in preparation for this book was I had the chance to go up to Skywalker Ranch and talk to the archivist there too, Layla French. And she kind of led me on this tour of some of the items that they had, just to kind of wrap my head around what's possible as we were making the list. And she has such a collection of chairs. So then this became the thing where like 5 of my items on my first 100 list were chairs. And then I started to realize it's too many chairs actually. So we had to start, picking and choosing. Like one of the ones that didn't make it was a handmaiden's chair. It's very beautiful. It has, some flower stitching in it that I hadn't really noticed before from on screen. And, initially it's on the list and then it got taken off the list, but replaced by Corday's robe, which is the best handmaiden item I could possibly come up with. And once, I think it was Layla who suggested it, once we had that in our mind, once I had that in my mind, I was like, there's no other handmaiden object for me. It is this one. This tells an amazing story. And also it reminded me of something that you really would see in a museum that is so breathtaking and tells a story even before you get to the plaque. You see it from across the room and you have to know why is that dress burned like that? Mm-hmm. And it's the kind of thing, if I saw across the room, I would rush over and immediately read that and ignore everything else in my path just to find out what that story was.
And you mentioned story, and I actually have to run real quick.
I'm sorry, Matt.
No worries. I'm going to the airport. I'm going to Disney World.
I know. Yeah, you're going to Disney. It's fine.
I can't complain. But I do want to ask, what is your favorite story from each era from the book?
I'm going to have to refer to the text. Hang on. My goodness.
The sacred text.
I know. Like I literally have
that
to
page literally
because
blew my eyebrows off. I absolutely love the sacred Jedi texts. Those are like my favorite.
You know what? I do love the Jedi texts from First Order era. And that was also an interesting one because we were trying to figure out where to place it because it technically could be pre-Republic era.
Right.
But we didn't want to get that deep in the weeds because we were cognizant that somebody coming to this book in our galaxy might think, hey, I discovered that in The Last Jedi, so that's the era where I'll find it. So we kind of went with more discovery order of where things are versus chronological necessarily. In the Republic era, I'm going to say it's actually for me, oh my goodness, no, it's like choosing my favorites.
The favorites are always a tough
darlings. It's Corday's robe. We're going to go Corday's robe.
There we go. I love it.
Imperial era, it's actually the Stormy doll. I love that one so much.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And
that is a good one.
That it's peeking out from here.
I see him.
Oh, I see him. He's hiding back there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Behind the High Republic.
Yes, from Batu, but also I thought just like what a nice way to balance out. There's it's a war. It's Star Wars. There's a lot of weapons. There's a lot of instruments of war, and this is just something that's so innocent in all of that, and I think really explores another aspect of the storytelling that was really fun to do. And then New Republic era's really tough, but I'm actually going to go with the gaffy stick. I know that's not what it says in the book. It actually says the other form of the word that I do not feel confident in pronouncing. But the best part of that for me was the discovery of, I put it on the list. I wanted to include it. And then Book of Boba Fett came out. And I saw that story and I was like, this is amazing.
Yeah,
This is, I couldn't take notes fast enough to tell that part of the story with something that I just thought, oh, this is cool. And it's representative of this group, and I think at that point we had definitely seen them in Mandalorian season 2 and seen them like cleaning the teeth of their banthas with it. So I was like, that's a fun little story. Yeah. And then your Book of Boba Fett comes out and I was like, I'm going to need another spread.
And then everybody was
so much more.
Yeah, because I was like, this story just got a lot more intense and interesting. And
let's give Kristin an entire page of this here.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Let's just keep going.
Well, and I think Grievous's mask was also another late edition that when we added it, I was like, I'm gonna need 2 pages. I'm sorry. There's a lot going on with him, and and I really wanted to incorporate that statue that gives you an idea of what his organic physical form looked like.
Right.
But that was just a really interesting exercise in with a printed book. There's also page count and there's some wiggle room, but we had to be careful we didn't do 2 spreads for everything because this thing would have been enormous.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Matt, do you have to head out? Is your Star Tours shuttle here?
The taxi is downstairs beeping. But yeah.
Oh my gosh, no, go. I don't want you to be late.
No,
have
no
fun
worries.
on Batu.
Thank you. Yeah, I will for sure.
Have a blue milk for me.
I will.
Yes.
Toast you all.
Thank
you so much for
doll
coming
if you
on.
don't have one.
It was great talking to you. So
it was
definitely
so nice
have to do it again.
talking to you.
Have a good one, everybody. Bye.
See you, Matt.
See you, Matt.
Bye.
All right, there he goes. We're still here talking about the book. So you mentioned items that didn't make the cut. I don't know how much you're allowed to really talk about, but like, what were some of your favorite items that didn't make the cut?
That did not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how, like, I guess to go off of that, like, how did it come up to be 100 items? Just because that's like that number kind of just makes sense, or?
Yeah. So that was just the initial pitch. That was just the idea. I think it's catchy. There is a real book. A real book. This is a real book, but there is another book or other books not related to the series, like 100 objects from history. I can't remember the title right now, but like there's other books that I've seen that have like 100 objects, and I thought, oh, that's a nice round number. Yeah. And of course, at different points when we were making the list, I was I was cursing myself for picking that number, because either it was really difficult to find like the last 10 or 20, because you start thinking of things that are too duplicative of something else you already have, or you start to think of things and you look on the list and they're actually higher on the list and you just have them twice. Like things like that happen. Or, conversely, at some point we got to the point where then we had 120, because like once you do get rolling on some of these different weird pockets of items that you don't that don't spring to mind initially, like the Wookiee Clarion Horn. That was one that I think we discovered through the archives that it existed. And then, of course, my cat wants to come. Did you hear him?
Yeah.
I heard something.
Yeah,
he had some input on the
this podcast. That's okay. He frequently likes to just yell towards the end of things. Like he'll be completely silent, and then the last 10 minutes he's like, "Excuse me."
That's fair.
Yeah, it's cats gonna cat. I completely lost my train of thought. What I was saying now.
I know, because you find the one thing and then it spreads into like 10 other things as it.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that, and then I started looking at like the visual encyclopedia and the comprehensive visual dictionary, and just looking at some of these like tiny items that we hadn't fully explored in with text necessarily, but that I knew existed, or we had great photography of them already, so we didn't have to reinvent the wheel there. And so it's funny, just like the different times with the creation of this book where it'd be like the first 20 is so easy I could write that list in my sleep, and then it gets a little bit harder, and then it gets really, really hard towards 100, and then you start getting some traction again, and then we have 125 objects, and I'm like, well, this book isn't called 125 objects, it's called 100, so we got to cut some things. And just making those choices. And sometimes it was the imagery or what's available to us to explore on the design front, what works well there. And, so that could be a factor in whether or not something made the cut. We had some really rollicking conversations about droid sentience that were amazing in our story meetings, with me and the editor, Alistair Dougal, and John Hall, the designer. Because towards the end too, we were adding items from forthcoming or just released series like Obi-Wan Kenobi and so one of the suggestions was putting Lola in, and I was like, absolutely not. I feel like, which is funny because there's Probe Droid in there, and that I was fine with, but I was like, Lola is a friend to Leia, and I was like, what does this say if she's in our exhibit? Is she dead? What has happened? And so I was like, we cannot include Lola. I'm sorry. And I was like, I will die on this hill for Lola. But not for the Probe Droid. I'm sorry. It's like the Probe Droid was like, to me, it was like Probe Droid is like your robotic vacuum. There's like a million.
There are a dozen.
yeah.
There's a million of them.
But I was like, but Lola is like your pet. Like I was like, we can't have her. I'm sorry. She's great. She's great, but she's not an object. I was like, I'll die on this hill. With Yoda, it was interesting. On my very first list, it was just like some Yoda item. I knew I wanted something from Yoda. And, then with Book of Boba Fett, I thought, oh, the lightsaber has come back. Should we use the lightsaber? Do we have too many lightsabers? And I thought too many lightsabers. Yoda's lightsaber is great, but no, I'm sorry. He's got other things. And so then I had Yoda's Gimmer stick for a little while.
Oh, yeah. On
my list. And then we completely pivoted and did Yoda's Blistle, because after reading the Star Wars The High Republic Adventures and seeing how much fun Yoda is and how he like bakes muffins for children, I thought the fact that this Jedi Master has this little whistle that he takes, this like little pan flute that he takes with him to Dagobah in his exile, is just a story I want to explore more. Like the Gimmer stick is great. And there's some really interesting lore where I don't know if it still stands, but that he could chew on it for nutrients. And there's like a lot of interesting pieces to that. And it would have been a fine object, but I was just really thrilled that we could include the Blistle, because I thought this is a story about Yoda's playful side. And that's the Yoda that you first meet in Empire Strikes Back too. He's a little silly, and he's not the super serious Jedi Master. And so I was just delighted that we could include something that explored that facet of the character instead of, just going with lightsaber, which I also thought for somebody who's so peaceful, lightsaber for Yoda felt kind of wrong as an item to represent. And Gimmer stick, would have been great, but I was like, Blistle. It's Blistle.
That's like what I love about this book though, is that it's more than just the helmets, it's more than just the lightsabers. It is just like these little random things that you might see, because like you always like see that Yoda's wearing it around his neck in Empire, and it's just like, what is that? Is he like carrying around like a pack of like chips or something? But like no, he's like it's actually an item, not just but like but to fully pivot, what was your favorite helmet or mask that you selected in this book?
Oh yeah, so that's actually a surprisingly easy one for me, because I love Boosh. I love the Boosh disguise. I have said for years, and I still haven't done it, if I did a cosplay where I created armor, I know it's hard to do. Like it's one of the most difficult ones, because I've talked to people like the 501st about it, and they're like, why are you choosing the thing that is difficult to go out of the gate with? But I was like, I just love it the most. And I love the story that has unfolded, especially in recent years, where, it's such to me, like an iconic look. And just such a great moment where Leia, pulls it off, and it's, you get to see who's actually saving Han Solo. And so I love all of those elements about it. I love that it's a representative of Leia, but also that now it has this whole other story where we have a comic on Boosh, and we also have, that Forces of Destiny short where you see her trying, getting the armor before she goes over to Tatooine. And also we have, I think there's also a comic beyond the Boosh comic where there's like a side mission where she's like trying out if she can actually pass as Boosh, because if she can't fool some of these other bounty hunters, is she going to be able to fool Jabba and actually execute this mission? So I just love that there's so much lore now around it too, but I would have picked it anyway because it is my favorite and I just love the look of it, and I could have talked enough to fill that page just based on that.
That's a great choice. Which item in the museum do you think would be under the toughest security or the tightest security?
Yeah. I think probably one of the Sith objects, because that just feels right for like somebody to come in there and steal it and do something nefarious with it. Yeah, so I'm gonna say the Sith lightsabers probably, because I feel like somebody with really bad intentions is on their way to break in and steal those. Like those belong in a vault.
They do, yeah.
Yes.
It belongs in a museum. Yeah.
And they're easier to steal because you just like smash and grab, and you can, just put them in your cloak and leave, versus like, can you imagine trying to get the bas relief out with like 3 of your friends past security? Like,
We can do this.
So heavy. It's enormous.
Well, one of my favorite things I learned from the book was that Max Rebo's he has his little drawer for snacks, like in his instrument. So what was one of, you probably have a lot, but what was something you didn't really know going into researching that you learned that was just like a great little fact like that?
So I gotta say, I am so delighted that you loved that particular piece of the
amazing
story, because that was actually one of the great privileges of doing this book. Was there's so much lore about so many of these items already, and we pulled from all of that, but then occasionally I would add something, and that is one of the things I added because I just thought Max deserves a little snack drawer. He's hungry all the time. Like, the lore is that he's constantly eating, but he's also up there playing for hours at a time. How is he going to do both? He's got a snack drawer. Exactly. He deserves it. He deserves that snack drawer. And so there were occasional moments where we got to add to the story in really fun ways. The one that's most personal for me is actually in the Wookiee clarion horn. I'm going to go back a ways, but in 2020, when we were doing This Week in Star Wars from home, I was visiting some of my friends and family in Pennsylvania for a couple of months. So the corner of the living room I was in changed for a couple of weeks, and I was in a new location, getting near the holidays. And so I borrowed my friend's dog to be on our Life Day episode, and we wrapped him in a red robe, and I dressed up as Leia, and his name is Porter. And we did this whole little bit at the beginning of the show. And he's since passed, but he was this massive doodle that was like 95 pounds, but thought he was a lap dog. So every time I would go to her house, he would sit on my lap, and I would be like crushed under the weight of him. But in like a really delightful way, because he really just thought he was still like a small puppy, I guess, and that this was fine. But he was like the kind of dog that when he greeted you, like if he was too excited, he could put his paws on your shoulders and just like be above you. So like very Wookiee-like. So when we got to the clarion horn, I had asked some questions of Lucasfilm and Story Group to try to ascertain if maybe, there was some lore that I wasn't aware of. But I really wanted to kind of set in a little bit more specificity with that item, with the pattern on it. And there's like a little Wookiee like face that you can see. And we ended up not being too specific with who that Wookiee face is, but they did allow me to name the Wookiee tribe that this came from. And so I took Porter's name and I made it very Star Wars, and it's got like 5 extra R's now in it. But the Porter tribe is named for that dog. And so that was just a lovely moment for me to really put something that is personally meaningful to me and to build into the Star Wars lore, which is just an opportunity I never fathomed I would have in my entire life. And now I've gotten to do it, a couple of times, especially with this book, when we had places where we were dealing with something that was more obscure and there just wasn't lore around it. And so we had the opportunity to add to it, which I don't think I've ever like giggled quite as loud to an email as when I got that message that said, oh, we're not going to name it. And it doesn't have a name. So what does Kristin want to name it? And I was like, does Kristin want to name it? Yeah, she sure does.
Oh, I didn't.
That's
That's so
fantastic.
cool.
Yeah.
That's such a cool detail. I love when people add little details that are, especially when it's something very special like that into Star Wars. Like we've talked with Landry Walker, who wrote the Sidon Athano Crimson Corsair stuff.
Yeah.
He's kind of added some of that stuff in his pre-Force Awakens books and stuff. We think we've talked to Adam Christopher, and he's done something similar. So like,
Yeah.
I just think that's so cool.
My favorite one from his is like he named a collection of Sith artifacts after his publisher or his editor as well. So E. Schaefer.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Eschafer. And then recently someone for us locally created like a bunch of Sith relics, but his name is actually like Eric Schaefer. So it's someone totally different, but also E. Schaefer, the Eschafer. So they've had this like little connection now because he created these Sith artifacts and like Adam wrote the story, and so like it's been very cool. And I hope that they get to cross paths officially one day. But
I love that stuff.
yeah, that's really cool, guys.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Adam Christopher's for so many reasons, but especially because of that book, and I love that story. But also on a personal note, that droid KB68, and
Really?
I love her. I love her.
Yeah, KB. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I knew he asked me about it before he did it, but I didn't know what role the droid had, so I expected it to be like quite small.
Wow.
And then she's like a complete badass.
Yeah.
And I just absolutely adore that character. But I think I would love that character regardless. But it's really quite special to me and humbling that he did that for me, as well as I love that he did that for Elizabeth. Elizabeth deserves it. She's done so much for Star Wars storytelling on the Del Rey side. Her and Tom, they're just champions of editorial. And the editors on these books never get enough credit for everything that they do. As the writer, your name is on it, and you get to do all the interviews, and people associate it with you, and that's all well and good because there's obviously a tremendous amount that goes in from the writer, but you cannot sleep on a good editor. Like editors, somehow, I think I've really lucked out with really great editors. And if we want to talk about timelines too, I feel like they're the editors more than any other project I've had. I think their names deserve to be on that front page with everyone who also wrote the text, because they just did such an amazing job of steering that enormous ship that was timelines. But just in general, I think I really appreciate all the editors I've had who are, compassionate and great to work with, and but also who make the text better, who, when I send my best effort in and they bring it back to me and it's better, and and they find errors that I can't see myself, because when you're writing, you read it 6 times and it looks perfect, and then someone else looks at it and they find the one typo, and you need somebody else with clear eyes to look at something. But it's also been wonderful with 100 Objects in particular. I had the same editor I had for Skywalker, and he was not a huge Star Wars expert. He's a fan, but he wasn't like deep in the weeds with the lore when we started the project. And that was so helpful, because he would ask me questions. He would question things that to me were like, oh no, but everybody knows that. And he'd be like, the example that comes to mind in Skywalker was, I couldn't say that Darth Maul had died in that first chapter on the battle in Naboo. And he kept coming back with these edits where he was like, you're kind of writing long here, and I really think we could just make it more succinct by just saying like, and he died. And I was like, well, but we can't. I'm sorry. I was like, chapter 7, he's coming back. It doesn't seem like he could, but trust me. So we have these like great conversations, like that, where I love seeing it through that lens. and getting that kind of feedback where it's like, oh yeah, this isn't just obvious to everyone, because not everyone has seen all of these movies, read all of these books, watched all of the series. So having kind of that voice coming in and learning it for the first time was really helpful, because it also told me that what we were doing worked well if this was one of your early entry points. And that was what I always wanted, especially with that book, in terms of not making it something where you feel like you have to have done any homework. But if you come into it cold, I'm going to spoil a lot of things about the saga. I'm sorry, but you shouldn't feel lost or left behind at any point. It should still give you all of the information that you need to understand this story.
Yeah. And that's good with a lot of Star Wars material, where you can kind of go in, whether it's a show, comic, any sort of medium, you can go in, and if you're new to the fandom or new to the thing, you're gonna feel kind of welcome and not too overwhelmed usually. So, and
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is a very cool people for, I hate to say like casual fans, but like it's like going to a museum. I mean, I go to a museum about something, and I have no idea what it's about, but I want to learn about that. So
yeah,
it's cool.
my goal with being a Star Wars author now has always been, I want to write a book that when I was a kid first discovering Star Wars and falling in love with it, that I would have wanted to pick up and be immersed in. And, I think so far I've done that in terms of, for me personally, when I finish a book, I think, no, this is something that little Kristin would have loved. She would have asked for it for her birthday or Christmas, and she would have devoured it. And I can definitely see that, I think, happening with young fans and just all fans of all ages, but with timelines in particular. It's the kind of thing that I loved trivia. I wanted to know everything about everything in Star Wars, when I first fell in love with it. And Timelines delivers, I think, in spades on, oh, you want to know everything? Here it is.
So I think that one of my last questions, just to kind of wrap it up with it, is how does it feel really to be one of the ones to write to essentially curate and write this lore that other future creators will be referencing?
Terrifying sometimes. No, it was a little daunting for sure going into it. And I think part of that was because when we first talked about the project, it seemed simpler than it was. In my mind, I thought, you order all of the books. We know where all of the books fall on the timeline already. Then you get into the weeds of the details of what happens in those books, and that's the timeline, easy peasy. And then, of course, you start doing the research and really realizing how many things interconnect and how many things are happening simultaneously. And even just in the course of a single battle, it's not as simple as saying this is the order of events. It's looking at, okay, there's something happening in the stars, and there's something happening on the ground, and there's something happening below ground too. And then sometimes these two things come back together. And how do we represent that visually to make it clear that this is what's happening, and that it's not just, and also I think in terms of visual design, of course, I'm a writer, not a designer, but I imagine an entire book of just one straight line would be a little boring over time. So, I thought it was really masterful the way that they represented those things, and they invited us as the writers to deliver off poorly drawn representations of what we thought each of those pages should look like, especially when it came to a battle page. They asked us to kind of draw out what you roughly think it should be. And I was like, I don't know. I hope this is right. Does this make sense? Because everything else we were working on was really spreadsheet based. So there was just a grid of information that they then had to incorporate into the design.
But with timelines, there's so much stuff in there. And how did you guys kind of all work together to get all the history of the galaxy in there? And as you just kind of said, you guys don't miss a beat with anything. You even have Hera and Kanan kiss was one of the things, and it's such a special thing, but it's such a small thing compared to
so I think that was Amy Raquel put that one in. I think that I think that credit goes to her. So again, I guess I just have to hand it back to the editors on this one, because even though there's 5 authors on it, and we did work together on things, as opposed to when I was working on the year by year update a couple years ago. Somebody had asked me oh, what was it like to work with Pablo Hidalgo? And I was like, I do work with Pablo other things, but I didn't work with him on this because his part of the job was done years before I started on it. And, so I really was just kind of like picking up the baton and running with it on that one. But this one, of course, all 5 of us are working in concert and working at the same time, and, dividing and conquering this amazing and enormous timeline. But I think that the credit of the collaboration really belongs with the editors, especially the DK team, because they just, they took it, and they were the ones that ran through all of the a lot of the conversations with Lucasfilm, with Story Group, to make sure that things were lining up where they needed to be. As authors, we were included in some of those as well, but definitely I think the editors really deserve so much credit on this project for getting it to the finish line and having it come to fruition. And on the Lucasfilm side as well, Brett Rector, whose name you will see in that big list, was steering the ship on that side of things. So you just had multiple editors who were getting this to the point where we would actually have this physical book. So yeah, I think all of the credit for us getting to work together and for working goes to that team for sure, to the editors.
Yes, thank you guys. Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
Seriously, it's incredible. Like I am obsessed with both of these projects, and yes, just all of that. So thank you, Kristin. Thank you so much for joining us today. My last and final question is, who is your favorite Glupshido?
It's a great question.
It's a great question. Oh, it's so hard. All right, I'm gonna name somebody and you tell me if they count. All right. Does Sice Noodles count as a Glupshido?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, no,
Of
it's
course
not.
it does.
It's Sai forever.
I am obsessed with that little like meme right now of just opening like a fridge and she's just like singing. So
Yeah. Someone sent that to me the other day, but they were in a microwave, and I was like, all right, yeah, I love it. I feel like the Max Rebo band is having a moment, and I'm 100% here for it.
Perfect.
Yes. Yeah, no, and Sai is more my favorite Glupshido now than before, because it's like the one thing I can talk about with this project so far. But I had the chance to write a story, and from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi, which is coming later this year. And on my, we did get to choose our fighter. And I had the hardest time picking because I love so many characters in Return of the Jedi, and I'm a huge Akbar fan, and I love Mon Mothma. And there's so many people so many characters who are in that movie to choose from, but Sice Noodles won, and she won out, and I'm so glad she did, because I was so pleased to spend so much more time with her and exploring this part of her story.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Like
I'm very excited,
I love any additional content on that. So yes, thank you again. For our listeners and viewers who might not be following you, have no idea who you are. Where can they find you on social media?
Yes. If they're new to this, they can absolutely find me on Twitter and Instagram at Kristin Baver, on the bookshelves, hopefully in your local library, but as well as in your local bookstore, with a number of titles now, which is insane to me. It's so many that when I try and list them out in my Instagram bio, it yells at me that I have used too many characters, which is a crazy problem to have.
No.
I never thought I would have that problem, but here we are, and it's such a privilege and a bizarre place to live. So yes, on Twitter, on Instagram at Kristin Baver, and every Thursday on This Week in Star Wars on StarWars.com and the Star Wars YouTube channel, and regularly contributing to StarWars.com editorial as well as Star Wars Insider.
Yes. Thank you, Kristin. Thank you so much. And so we can find everything for HoloNet Marauders on Twitter at HoloNet Marauder, Instagram at HoloNet Marauders. And yeah, we'll see you guys next time in the HoloNet Marauders podcast.
Go check out these books.